Fonfera, Rojas, and France, Ranking Member Davis, and distinguished members of the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee. Thank you for allowing me to submit testimony in support of Senate Bill number 1013, Section 2. My name is Pat Rogers. I'm a CPA with the state of Connecticut, and I work for Rings End as their internal auditor. I support this bill because there is a discrepancy between how the state of Connecticut taxes manufacturing equipment housed in a centralized manufacturing facility versus a decentralized facility such as a retail store. Currently, any equipment located in a retail store cannot be deemed manufacturing without a special exemption. The purpose of my testimony today is to obtain a special exemption from personal property and sales and use taxes for paint manufacturing equipment located in a retail store. All paint retailers, including Rings End, purchase what is known as base paint from a variety of suppliers. Base paint is a semi-transparent viscous liquid that is comprised of solvents, binders, resins, and other additives. If you walk into any paint store, you will see the shelves lined with base paints waiting to be finished to the customer's specifications. In order to finish base paint, every paint retailer uses a decentralized manufacturing process to mix colorants with base paint according to precise formulas. The process requires that each location have a color matching machine that determines the mixing formula to achieve the precise color desired, a tinting machine to insert the colorant into the base, and a mixer to combine the colorant and base. All three pieces of equipment are essential to completing the paint manufacturing process. Without these three pieces of equipment, neither the colorant nor the base paint is saleable or usable on its own. The reason why paint retailers do not utilize a centralized manufacturing process is because the finished product has an approximate shelf life of 1 year after colorant is added to the base paint. Therefore, in order to meet the demands of our customers, paint retailers would have to maintain much larger inventory quantities of finished paint that would presumably generate large quantities of spoiled goods. The decentralized manufacturing process allows paint retailers to reduce inventory levels, offer thousands of color choices and different sheens simultaneously, and reduce hazardous waste. The state of Connecticut understands the business case for utilizing a decentralized process and housing manufacturing equipment in a retail environment. That is why Connecticut granted a special exemption for optical lens manufacturing equipment located in retail stores such as LensCrafters or ProVision. Also, I would like to point out that the Supreme Court of Iowa and Illinois have both ruled that paint mixing equipment is essential to the paint manufacturing process and should be deemed manufacturing equipment. With that said, I believe paint retailers are being unfairly taxed on their paint mixing equipment, and I would greatly appreciate the legislature's assistance in rectifying this matter. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Pat, and thank you coming all the way up from Darien. It's a long ways away.
No problem.
First question for you is, in Connecticut, how many of these decentralized mixing machines do you think there are? Just a ballpark guess would be great.
I mean, we are the largest paint retailer in Connecticut, and we have our total gross value, regardless of depreciation level, is worth $1.2 million. And the property taxes and sales taxes obviously are a percentage of that, you know, either purchase value or depreciated value. So, I mean, there's really, after us and Home Depot and Lowe's and Sherwin-Williams, it just drops off. I mean, the total impact to the state, quite honestly, if that's what you're interested in, my guess, I mean, 500,000 to $1 million, if that. I mean, that's stretching it.
Yeah, that's pretty insignificant. I suspected that, but it's good to hear from the expert as to what your opinion is anyway. Any other questions or comments for Pat? Representative Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Pat, so much for being here. It's a pleasure to represent you, and it was a pleasure also to work on this with you. Pat brought this to my attention, and particularly what stands out is that LensCrafters, there are exemptions from this tax, so I think in fairness it would seem to be a level thing to do and a common sense thing to do to make our state increase the business-friendly perception of our state. So I thought your testimony was great, and I hope it gets support. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, if I could just clarify that
Please
as
do.
well. The DRS has an opinion that if you're a paint retailer or a retailer in general, excuse me, regardless of whatever equipment you have, is not exempt. If you're a retailer, you're out. You need a special exemption to qualify. So a special exemption allows for the state to apply reason, clarity, transparency, and fairness when looking at the specifics of the business use case.
Thank you. Yes, Representative Wood.
I also should mention I did have a site visit, and when you see this, the actual process, you realize that the paint, the base paint that is shipped from the manufacturers, call it Benjamin Moore or Sherwin-Williams, it is unusable, and I don't think most people understand that you all do finish off that process, and it multi-sensory learning, when you see it, you understand it. Anyway, thank you again for the indulgence.
Thank you, Representative Wood. Any other questions or comments for Pat? Yes, Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could you give us the average cost of this piece of equipment that's in the retail store? So whether it be Home Depot or the local True Value, what's the average cost of the equipment that it takes to do this mixing?
So, if a customer brings in a paint chip and they're trying to match that color.
No, excuse me.
Yeah, the equipment itself.
The equipment itself. So if I'm a retailer and I'm purchasing that machine new,
yep.
What's the purchase price of that machine? I'm trying to get an idea for local property tax assessment picture.
Yep. There's 3 pieces of equipment. The color matching machine, that's $5,000. The tinter, that's anywhere from $30,000 to $45,000. And then mixers. If it's a single-gallon mixer, it's about anywhere. It's $1,500. If it's a 5-gallon mixer or a case shaker, those are $5,000 as well. And an average Rings End store has 3 mixing stations or more.
Okay, but one setup, round figures at the top, is about $40,000.
That's fair.
That was my question. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Davis.
Thank you. Thank you for testifying here today. Your request for the sales tax to be included, would that be on the purchase of that equipment? The sales tax would then not be collected, or are you recommending for the sale of the product that you are mixing then be sales tax exempt?
Oh, no, just the equipment itself. If you are a manufacturer in the state of Connecticut, my understanding is that you do not pay sales tax on the manufacturing equipment. I'd be happy to split the difference.
And that's the purchase of that equipment, business to business, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and that's what you're asking for here?
When we're buying it from our supplier, our
Yes.
vendor, Fluid Management is the company.
And that's what you're requesting that we add into the bill, that same type of exemption for the paint equipment when you're purchasing those?
Yes, I just think in the eyes of fairness and balance with other manufacturers, then yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions? Yes, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your testimony. Just how do we compare to other states, especially New England, with the taxation or lack of taxation on?
So we have a store in New York, in South Salem, New York. We do not have to pay sales tax, and they do not have property tax. So, I mean, they have their own issues, but just with just in comparison to paint mixing equipment, it's night and day.
So it's common practice not to tax generally in other states, you would say?
Generally not, and just, typically what Sherwin-Williams does is they'll intentionally file a return incorrectly, and then when harm is inflicted upon them, that's when they sue the state. And that's how they've gotten to Iowa and Illinois. So I'd rather not do that. I'd rather just meet with you, speak reasonably about it, and see what we decide.
Well, thank you for your testimony, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Anybody else? Any other questions, comments? Thank you. Before you leave, I want you to know you have a very good representative in the House who's worked very hard and long on this bill.
Thank you very much. Representative Wood.
Thank you, and have a great weekend.
Thank you, you too.